Are there any young people that might like to join me up here for the sermon today? I hope so. Did you see that? Right. Go on. I can't chase you now. It's a little heavy on this side. Now, normally, I might have something in my hand and read from it. What's that book called?
The Bible.
Yeah, the Bible. But today, our scripture, we aren't going to read it. I'm going to tell you what the story is from the Bible. Now, there's two persons in this story. And it's a really, really important story. So listen real carefully, because I'm going to ask you some questions about the story to see if you got it. Can we do that? Okay? Now, the two persons in this story are Jesus, okay? And when Jesus is speaking in this story, we're going to pretend that he's sitting right where I am, okay? Can we do that? And you know who the other person in this story is? A really smart lawyer. Is that okay? But when the lawyer's talking, we're going to pretend he's standing right there and looking at Jesus. Can we do that? Okay. Now, Jesus had been teaching people all sorts of new ways to live life and everything. And some of the higher-ups in the religion of the day didn't like what he was doing, okay? So they got this really smart and really good lawyer to come and test him. How many of you ever had a test? Did you ever have a test? Did you ever have a test in school or something like that? Okay. What's a test? When you take a test, what are you finding out? The answers to questions, but it's a test to see if you know the right answer, huh? And how much you know. So that's what this lawyer was doing. He was testing Jesus. So are you ready for the story? Okay. Who am I? The lawyer. Okay. One day, while Jesus had been teaching the people, a young lawyer came up to him and asked him, "Rabbi, what do I have to do to be in God's good graces? What do I have to do to get in with God?" And Jesus answered him and said, "Well, have you read the Bible?" And the lawyer said, "Well, yeah." And Jesus said, Jesus said, "Well, what do you think it says in the Bible about getting in good with God?" So the lawyer, who's on the defensive now, the lawyer says, "Well, it says you're supposed to love the Lord with all your heart and soul and mind and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself." You know what Jesus said? Jesus says, "You're right, go and do it." And the lawyer realized, uh-oh, I didn't catch him. He's winning, so I got to ask him another question. So the lawyer's still trying to test Jesus, okay? And remember what the lawyer said? What are the two things to do? Love God and what? Love your neighbor as yourself, okay? Can you remember those two things? Because that's what the lawyer said. And Jesus said, "That's right, go and do those things." Then the lawyer says, "Well, who is my neighbor?" Good question? Good question? Well, let's see. Okay, now it's Jesus' turn to answer the question. And he told the lawyer this story. One day, a man was walking down a very busy road. Now, it's a very busy road, but remember, in Jesus' time, there weren't any automobiles, and hardly anybody owned horses. So what did they do when they were on a busy road? They walked. And there were a lot of people, okay? Very busy road. Man's walking down the road, and some thieves jumped on the man. And they beat him up, took his clothes and all his money, and threw him in the ditch. And he was half dead. Isn't that awful? But that's what happened. So, now remember, it's a busy road, and lots of people are walking on it. So Jesus said, and what happened next was, a lot of people just saw the guy lying there, and they walked right past him. In fact, two of the people that saw that man lying in the ditch were very important people in like the church then. A priest and a teacher. They saw the guy and walked right past him, said Jesus. However, the story goes on. Jesus said, but then along came someone from Samaria, a Samaritan. Now, Samaritans weren't part of the in crowd, you know. They weren't in the good crowd. They were thought of as, they aren't very good, special. Let's just ignore them. The Samaritan saw the man lying in the ditch, and he couldn't stand just to leave him there. So you know what he did? The Samaritan went to the man in the ditch. He performed first aid on him. He picked him up out of the ditch, put him on his donkey, and took him to a little hotel because the man needed to get better, okay? And you know what the Samaritan did then? He actually went to the person who ran the hotel, gave him a bunch of money, and said, look, take care of him, help him get better, and on my way back, I'm going to stop, and I'll pay you whatever more you had to spend. Now, isn't that something? Isn't that something? So the Samaritan goes on his trip, and then Jesus says to the lawyer, listen to this is really important. Jesus asks this question, who do you think acted as a neighbor in this story? Well, the lawyer, he had been listening, and you know what his answer was? Well, it was the Samaritan. And then Jesus said to the lawyer, you are right. Now, go and do the same. Now, I have a question for you. This story started out with a question from the lawyer. Do you remember that? Do you remember what the question was? How do I get in good with God? But then when Jesus said, well, go love your neighbor, the lawyer said, who is my neighbor? Do you remember that? And I ask you all, hey, that's a good question, isn't it? Yeah? Actually, it was the wrong question. It was the wrong question. What do we know about the man in the ditch in the story? What can you tell me about the guy in the ditch? He was half dead. He needed help, didn't he? But was he a good guy? We don't know, do we? Was he married? We don't know. Did he have kids? We don't know. Was he from Samaria? Was he from Israel? But we don't know anything about him except one thing. He needed help, huh? Okay. So Jesus made that point that the need was there and the Samaritan responded to it, and that's what it meant to act as a neighbor. So Jesus taught that lawyer a lesson that the lawyer didn't expect. He said, the right question is, how can I be a neighbor to other persons in need? Can we say that? It's a long question. How can I be a neighbor to persons in need? Now, that's really important for us here in this church, because you know our New Beginnings. Have you all heard about the New Beginnings program and everything? Sure you have. Well, as we go forward, we're going to be focusing on our mission in the community, on helping people in need. Wherever the need is, that's our signal, taught Jesus. so we can go and be a neighbor. You see the difference between asking, who's my neighbor, and asking, how can I be a neighbor? Good. You see the difference? Because guess what Jesus would tell you? Jesus would tell you, okay, go and do it. Okay?